is the first time that recreational pot has been sold legally in the modern world. People are psyched.
Piece of history.
They're lining up around the block for legal marijuana sales in Colorado.
It's a massive story. People are watching very closely what's happening here.
The Denver Post has actually hired an editor to cover marijuana.
It's close to my heart, and I want it to kick ass and be relevant. People are excited that the Post is going out on a limb and trying something like this. Super thankful to have a staff to back me up.
For us to try something like this, it's almost a survival tactic.
You really need to be on your game.
The most famous reporter, journalist from the United States. Please give him a round of applause, please. Thank you. How did you get involved with the cannabis industry as a journalist?
I was a journalist for a daily newspaper for more than 20 years when my boss popped up and the recreational sales were about to be implemented the next month. And they asked me if I would take on cannabis as a beat, create a freestanding site to cover it from a place of journalistic integrity, covering the good, the bad, the fun, the business, and that's where we started. And we ended up creating a site called The Cannabis, and it's still around. It's at thecannabis.co, and it's a product of a daily newspaper. It's really fascinating to see mainstream media in the US starting to recognize that this subject matter, that this plant deserves serious journalism and deserves, the proper spread of information as opposed to so much of the damage that's been done by the mainstream media in the past decades. Yeah. And that's really where I came in from and just wanted to approach it from, let's cover the good and the bad. We don't have a dog in this fight. And as you guys know, High Times, many other publications that came well before us, very important, but also, they are activists and they are telling the stories that make the industry look good, that make the plant look good. There are stories that make the industry bad, and we told those as well. I think it's important to hold any industry accountable. And so in addition to having some fun and doing the pot reviews and writing from a serious perspective about edibles, we also tackled the issue of pesticides, lab testing, all the kind of stuff that you think about when you enter a legal regulated market.
I saw your documentary. I saw the editor of the Denver Post, the Denver Post.
Yeah.
I said, no, we're never going to let him go. But I got to know that you don't work for them anymore. You do something else.
Yeah, I left the Denver Post and the Cannabis in December. I'm freelancing for Esquire and for the Daily Beast, and I just started my own content agency working publicity and marketing projects with cannabis and hemp businesses. So I'm bringing my expertise and working with the industry, and it's thrilling because really, honestly, 3.5 years ago, I was a journalist who enjoyed cannabis, and in the process of the last 3.5 years, I've learned so much. And learned how much I didn't know back in the day, and now I'm proud to be working in this industry.
Yeah, and getting, like me, I'm a journalist sort of thing, and I got into the cannabis industry, but what was most surprising finding out?
Well, I'm just now doing it. I just launched my business about a month ago. It's called Grasslands. You can check it out at mygrasslands.com. And so far, I think one of the things that's always surprised me about cannabis business is you have these stereotypes, and especially in the US, you just grow up with weed being this thing. And really, when I got this job, here I was talking to the most influential activists against legalization, for legalization, and I really, as a journalist and a human being who's just very curious, dug in and learned myself so I could be able to tell when people were talking bullshit and lying to me, or if they're actually telling the truth. And there's a guy named Mason Tavert. He's one of our neighbors in Denver, and his thing is cannabis is safer than alcohol, and he just repeats it ad nauseum, not to demonize another substance, but rather just to point out this glaring mistruth that's been spread over the years. And when I realized myself just 4 years ago that cannabis is way safer than alcohol, it was so mind-opening, and it really made me want to dig in further. And I just realized the stereotype is shit. Of course, we all know successful stoners, people who get shit done and use cannabis, and now I'm happy to count myself among them.
And you've been around in Amsterdam today and yesterday, I think. I mean, how many times have you been in Europe? And looking now in Europe, what's happening here? I mean, how does that seem from an American point of view? If you look how we struggle with all the double standards we have in most countries in Europe.
Sure, and I'll be speaking a little bit about this on the main stage briefly later after 8. But, you know, I was in Amsterdam for my first time 18 years ago. It was so incredibly eye-opening to see a coffee shop, especially given the education that I received in public schools in the US, where your president and your parent and your mentor are all lying to you. And granted, your mom and dad don't know they're lying to you, they're just parroting what the president told them. And so I think what's happening in Europe right now is very fascinating. Obviously, all of these medical conversations. I just did an interview with CB, the DJ skunk star who's playing the main stage, because he hails from Austria, and what a fascinating thing is happening there, right in the shadow of Germany and this developing scene where you can sell seeds and clones, but don't grow them. Don't grow them. And so I think there's just a lot of these double standards. We sat in on the earlier panel on coffee shops, and while I don't speak Dutch, you know, we've been talking a lot about the coffee shop model and its imperfections, and it's really disappointing to learn that, because I think you grow up in America thinking Netherlands has it figured out. No, there are very real problems here. My heart goes out to you. It's very difficult, but I think with each successful implementation we see, from Uruguay to Colorado to Canada, holy hell, and California, of course, then it's going to make it much easier for places like Holland to get their regs in order, to actually get regulated, and to hopefully make Germany a soluble market.
Yeah, okay. And in the United States, a lot of things, you know, happening with the different sort of the states that are all different and handling the whole situation differently. Where do you think we end up, sort of thing, knowing what you now know?
You know, it's inevitable that America is heading to some sort of federal legalization, but how long is it going to take? You know, even though we have the president that we do now and the attorney general who we do now, who's very anti, it's just, it's a complicated situation, because 2012 you have 2 states, 2014 you have 2 more states plus DC, and then last year we had 9 initiatives, 9 states voting on legalization initiatives all over the country, and 8 of them won. And when you have a social subject going 8 for 9 in an election, you'd think that the end is near, the end of federal prohibition is near. It's not quite that easy, but I do think we're heading towards something. And you know, legislation is very messy in America. It's kind of a disaster, and we still have parts of the country that you can't buy alcohol in at all. You would have to go into another city or another county. And so inevitably that's what this is going to look like. And in many ways, this might be unpopular to say, but one of the true successes of the Colorado model, as we've seen people come in from Scandinavia and other states to study what we've done, it's really giving that element of local control to the city, to the county. So if they don't want the sales there, if they don't want, you know, the processing there, they can say no. But ultimately, inside that state, you know, that exists, and they can't say no to use or cultivation, and I think that's important.
I was kind of surprised in Berlin to see a very, you know, Republican guy who was a speechwriter of Reagan, or maybe didn't. Yeah, he was a speechwriter of Reagan, and people in the hall were all applauding because he has a statement. He was very important for the legalization in the United States. Rottenberg, what's his name again?
Rohrabacher, probably.
Yeah. But, you know, if you compare with the old activism and the new people getting involved, how do you see these two, basically lines aiming for the same thing?
You know, this is becoming more and more of a nonpartisan issue in the States. It's certainly not there yet, because when you look at the polls of acceptance, of course, a very strong majority of Americans want to see this substance legalized recreationally. And that exists, and certainly it's more young people than old people, and it's more Democrats than it is Republicans, but Dana Rohrabacher is a great example. this is gaining a lot of traction among Republicans and, of course, among libertarians. And so it's not as much that issue as it seems to be now one of age. And it's complicated because, of course, this does not trend well among those 65 and older.
Okay. Okay, Ricardo, we're finished. We've gone. I think time is up. So I don't know if you have any final statement you would like to make in front of the Dutch and international people we have sitting here, from your point of view.
Well, I'm honored to be here. This is historic. When I came to Amsterdam my first time, I was so new to this world, really, brand new. And it's just an honor to be here at such a great event that these guys throw. And I hope if you're around, come over at 8:20 and we'll celebrate on the main stage with a few more words. But thank you, Stephen. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, Ricardo Baca.